we're here in the Same God series, super pumped. Last week, I thought Carl did an awesome job talking about money, but the thing about it is that when he mentioned he was talking about money, you could almost hear a vacuum sound in the room where people are like, here we go. Gonna ask us about money, gonna talk to us about what we're supposed to do with our bank accounts. But I thought he did a great job. And then for this week, it'll be way more exciting because we're gonna talk about rules. Yeah, isn't that exciting? Insert vacuum sound. Air being sucked out of the room. And it was funny because this week, somebody said, Jeremy, are you preaching this weekend? And I said, yeah. And what are you talking about? And I said, rules. And they was like, you're going to talk about rules? Maybe there's a better option for that. I haven't really been real good with rules in my life, but I do love a good rule, to be honest with you. I like the structure that they bring, and I love, things that are undeniably in existence because God created them. Like Eric talked about the stars in the sky. They're there because God put them there. It's pretty amazing. That's a rule. But this week I was at work in the office and going over some scheduling stuff and everything, and I noticed on the table there was a list that had been put together in hot pink pen. I thought, I must see what this list is about. And it was a list of rules for language in the office. And it was pretty good. It was written by two teenage gals that the daughters of one of the guys that works there. And there's some pretty good rules in there. So I just thought I'd share this as sort of an opener for what we're going to be talking about today. These were cuss word rules because there's some salty language in the construction industry. If you haven't been involved in that before, it gets a little left-handed from time to time. But these are the rules that they came up with. And there's a tally board in the office associated with who is swearing. I don't have any marks on the tally board because I don't make a habit of swearing if that's what you're reading into this. It's not my tally board, but there is a tally board and I think the rule is if it gets up to 9, then there's repercussions. But these are the rules. Nothing associated with crass or cuss words. That's a good one. No cussing. No words that have a double meaning because that is inappropriate. These rules apply to all cuss words and crass words. This is my favorite one of all. Use language, and this was written by teenage girls in front of all these guys that come in and out of this office. It says, use language you would use if you could see God standing in front of you. Like, ooh, that's a pretty good one. And then they end it with, if you fail to comply, there will be consequences. Be forewarned. That's written in big letters along the bottom. I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm going to write that down. And then there's penalties too. One of the penalties is you have to go to church. If you get 9 marks on your name, you have to go to church. And the other one is we get to do a makeover on you if you have 9 marks next to your name. So I've been sneaking marks in next to my boss's name to see if I can, hey, makeover or church, you pick it. It's the rules, they said. Then they gave some optional words too, like 4 of them. There were toot, darn, oh man, and whoops. Well, those are pretty good. I added Jeepers Creepers to the list because I just love to hear people say Jeepers Creepers. But the thing about rules is they give us structure and they give us guidelines. And as you know, if the world was left to itself, just like young kids, if you let your kids raise themselves, it'll be a mess. They're not going to tend towards following the rules. They're not going to tend towards the good things. They're going to tend to everything selfish, and the rules will be thrown out the window, and it's going to be a mess. I think like in the NBA, we've seen, I'm sure if you've watched any national basketball, you see that they sometimes seem to allow a 5-step dunk because the dunk is really cool, and the referees just turn the other way like, let's just let them have that. Or the other day I was watching the relay race, the women's relay race, and you may have seen this, but one of the gals took the baton from the woman behind her and then realized someone else was ahead and just went crack and bonked this gal on the head, and the woman fell down, and then I don't know if she thought no one was going to notice or something like that, but she got disqualified because we have rules for things like that, right? You cannot use the baton as a bat to win the race. It's fairly simple, but when left to ourselves without structure, that's what happens. People cheat. But the thing is that the rules acknowledge that there is an authority. There is something in effect that's high and above us that we have to adhere to. And interestingly, there's rules in our human life that are pretty easy to adhere to, like speed limits and how you talk to people and all these kinds of things. And we actually tend to fear those rules more than we fear God's rules because we're in it and we're down here and we're living on earth. And God's rules are just a byproduct of what we read in the Bible sometimes. And I'm not saying everybody's guilty of that, but it is easier to follow man's rules, especially taxes, right? People fear the IRS. And whether we should or shouldn't, whatever, pay your taxes. I personally feel that I should be allowed to mark 47 dependents on my tax return. And it's strictly based on my refrigerator bill. Does anybody in here have teenage boys, by the way? They are, yeah, Sarah Nichols, you know what I'm talking about. They are machines designed to devour and eat things. And I feel like I could justify, well, listen, Mr. Taxman, I do have 47 dependents compared to people that live by themselves. So just let that one slide. But you can't break the rules. They're there for a reason. So in the Old Testament, this is where all these rules get started. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 2 is familiar about the 10 Commandments. And God lays down these laws, but before he says any of these things, he says, I am the Lord your God. And like we've sung about today, there is a God that is far and away above us, that is over us and in charge and created everything. And this, in Leviticus, which is the book of the law, this phrase is used in one way or another 45 times as God is laying out the law for his people. It just says, I am the Lord your God. And in this verse, 20 verse 2, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So I am the God that parted the Red Sea. I am the God that brought all the plagues on the Egyptians. And I am the one that allowed you to walk out of the city with plundering the Egyptians with all their stuff. And they told you to go. That was me that did that, not you. And you guys all saw it. And I'm the one that had the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that you followed around. That was me. God did that, and none of you did that. And that's a rule. And then the Israelites had a choice to believe it or not, just like we do today. You can either acknowledge that there's a God and believe in him and follow him, or you can decide that it's not for you and disregard. But regardless of what you decide, there's still a God that says, I am the Lord, follow me, and it's not me, it's not you. We are not allowed to be our own God as much as we try. So these 10 commandments are based on a choice, whether we want to believe in this God or not, and they go like this. It says in verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And then no idols. Don't misuse God's name. Keep the Sabbath, honor your mom and dad. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, and do not covet. And God's telling his people, these are the things that are going to separate you from me. These are the things that are going to break communion, break fellowship, set us apart, and drive us away from each other. So don't do these things. Because Satan's goal, as you know, is separation from us and God, separation from us and our Creator. So on one side, you have this battle going where Satan's saying, like, don't believe in that stuff. Don't worry about it. You can be your own God. And on the other side, God is saying, don't listen to him. These are the things that separate us. And we experience it all the time. It's like the two crickets on our shoulder, one saying do good, one saying do evil. But I feel pretty good, actually, about the 10 Commandments. I feel like I'm maybe like a 6 out of 10, maybe 5 out of 10 on those. Which begs the questions, well, which ones aren't you doing good, Jeremy? Is it murder? Did you murder people? Why did you come all the way from the Northwest to Colorado? That's a long ways to go. I'll just let you decide. You just judge my character, figure out if that's why I'm here. It's not because of murder. Or is it? No, it's not. But I am the Lord, and the Lord means we're acknowledging that there's an ultimate authority. There's somebody in charge, right? There's a beginning and the end. There's a king, there's a father, there's whatever you want to call him. There's a God that is in charge of everything, and it's not my way anymore. But the problem with this is as you know in the Bible, the Israelites, they come out of Egypt and everything's hunky-dory and they get the 10 Commandments, and yet they still break the law. So then there has to be this penalty. There has to be a payment. And God, this is where you start to see the heart of God, because God says, I'm going to tell you how to make this right. I'm going to tell you how to bring yourself back into the fold, back into fellowship with me when you've been separated. So then you go into Leviticus, which is I was surprised. I listened to the whole book of Leviticus preparing for this, and be honest with you, there's potential for it to be a little dry. because it's just the book of the law. But the more you get into it and the more you hear phrases like, I am the Lord, and then this, and then I am the Lord your God, and I am the Lord over and over, and start digging into it, you can kind of understand what God was doing with these people. And so you have these details and requirements for sacrifice to cover sins. And the first one is you had a sin and a guilt offering, which was a mandatory thing. You didn't have a way out. And it's because you had to have payment for these sins and disobediences, and you realize that I deserve punishment, I need to be saved from this, so here's what I'm going to do. And they would have these offerings of the finest of their flock, depending on how much you had. Sometimes it was a heifer or a cow, sometimes it was a sheep. Poorer people would bring a bird or a dove or something or whatever they could, but the point of it was that this was going to be sacrificed to God. Something innocent needed to take your place, and that's why they used animals. And then there's these other burnt offerings that were coverings for what might have just been an unintentional sin or something you didn't realize that you had done and somebody had brought it to you, and nonetheless you're still guilty. So then there's these other offerings that were just these surrenders, like I did not mean to do that, but I realize I've sinned, and I need to be back in relationship with you, God. I need to make right the wrong that I committed. And still, again, realizing that you are God, you're the one that makes the rules, and I serve you. And then the ultimate goal was more offerings, but they were fellowship offerings, which was after you had taken care of your sin, it's an expression of thankfulness to God that I'm back in communion, I'm back sitting at the table with God, and you have made things right. And the deal about this is if you would imagine yourself back in this day, so there was like 600,000, something like that, men that were counted in the Israelite nation, just the men, which meant there was wives and children and all this stuff. So there would have been millions of people in the Israelite nation, all of them sacrificing things for their sins. And if you were a surrounding nation watching this happen, you might have thought they just love to barbecue. They love getting together and cooking meat or something like that, because there's a lot of animals that are dying there. But it would have been a bloody, gory, gruesome, smoky thing, right? All these sacrifices that are going. I would imagine that one of the thoughts would have been is, like, this is cruel. This is unusual. Why do so many things have to die? I mean, have you ever thought that when you've read through the Old Testament? Why did all these innocent animals have to die? What was the point of all this? And the Israelites would have realized, man, this kind of thing, it doesn't allow for much secret sin, if I'm being honest. I would have had to pick the best of my flock and walk up to the priest in front of everybody and have people on the way look at me and like, oh, rough week, Bartholomew, or whatever. That's probably a Jewish name. Rough week, huh? Yeah, I got to sacrifice again. It would have been out there for everybody to see that something innocent needed to take my place. And it would have been this kind of a sad but glorious thing for the Israelites, because they would have said, I am wrong with God, I am out of his fellowship, and I'm going to make myself right again. And I think this is kind of where we start to see God's heart in the whole Bible and the whole story of why this goes down, is that God knows the issue. I mean, it started in the Garden of Eden with the fall of man. God knew the issue, that sin had come into the world. And he knew we were guilty. And yet, he says, I know you're guilty, but I'm going to lay out a plan for you to get back to me, even in the Old Testament. I'm going to lay out a way for you to be made right with me again. And in fact, not only that, I'm going to provide the way for you to do it out of my own bank account. And it's not going to take you. I mean, that's where we find out how much God loves us. Because the reality is, I'm guilty, not that animal. It wasn't the animal that sinned. It was me, and yet I don't have to pay for it, even in the Old Testament. And we know it's a picture of what's to come. But God says, in his grace, in his love for us, I'm going to make a way. And it's a rule that you find all the way through the Bible. I've said this before, but there's so little that we do in our Christian walk, and so much that God does for us to provide the way. And he always does. He always provides the way, and that's the heart of God. He sees our guilt and he doesn't condemn us. He immediately provides a way for us to be right with him again. It's interesting to me. I mean, he saves my life by offering something different. He doesn't require my life in exchange for my sin. And he provides the instructions and the sacrifice. In Psalms 24, verse 1, says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, for he founded it on the seas and established it on the waters, just like we sang. Everything that you see is God's. Everything. I mean, the animals that are created, the technology that we have, it's all a path of discovery of the things that God put in place at creation. None of us is our invention. And it's funny to watch people gloat and like, oh my goodness, you see how fast that car is, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds or whatever it is. You know why that works? Because God invented internal combustion. Yeah. To defeat the electric car. I believe that's why he did it. I have on good authority that Jesus was a Mopar man. Probably. But everything that you see that we have, it's just a path of discovery of what God has created. Nothing is new other than what God made. Everything we have is just because God made it. The air we breathe is in this room because God has made it so. The fact that our lungs pump air and our heart pumps blood is because God made it so. Everything belongs to the Lord, like we sang in that song. And it is amazing, and that's a rule. It's absolutely 100% certain that everything we have came from the Lord. The ability to make money and buy a house, everything starts with the Lord. There's a story in the Bible, just a short little depressing thing that I'd like to talk to you about, called the Book of Job. Have you ever read that? Yeah, it's a good one to read when you're thinking about rules, further depression. Maybe next week we should just read the encyclopedia. That'll be a fun way to cap off this series. I don't think he's going to do that. But Job is this story, it's kind of a mystery as to why God would say to Satan, I'm going to allow you to sift my servant Job. And there's different theories and stuff on that, but nonetheless, Job goes through this horrible time where he loses his family, he loses his wealth, animals, land, everything, and he's basically at the lowest of low. He's reduced to the only thing that gives him a little relief is scraping himself with bits of broken pottery. It's a pretty low, right? And not only that, his wife at one point says, Job, curse God and die. All right, that's real good advice from your wife, right? And his friends are surrounding him saying, what did you do, Job? Why is God doing this to you? And Job says, I don't know, but I'm going to serve the Lord anyway. And finally, just before chapter 38 of Job, he finally starts to complain a little bit, like, all right, God, why? Why is this happening to me? And in chapter 38 of Job, starting in verse 2, God says to him, Job, who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? And if God were to say this next thing to me, I would be shaking. It says, brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have called down the thunder. Here we go. And God asked Job, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who did that, Job? And it goes on for several chapters, and I can just imagine Job hanging his head. It's like, I get it. I'm not the Lord, you are. You're in charge of this, God. It's a rule. God is in charge of everything that he's created. He gives and he takes away. And it's not because he's a mean God. It's not because he's an angry God. It's because he loves us. And sometimes it's hard to understand, but that's the root behind what God does for us each and every day. And it is a rule. God provides a path back to him. And Satan wants us separated. God wants us to be together, and it's a rule. And the lesson that Job had to learn was this one, that everything belongs to the Lord. Everything I gave you, Job, belongs to me. And somewhere along the way, Job probably forgot to appreciate that. And the Lord taught him, and then Job was restored and got everything back that he had before plus. And it's God's heart on display for Job. But the one thing I want us to know is that every payment that God requires of us comes from God's account. Whether it was Old Testament animals or time or money or anything, it all came from God's account. The only thing that would mean the most to us, our very life, God doesn't ask of us. He wants us to give it to him, but he never says, take your life as payment of sins. He always provides a way, which leads us to the New Testament and how these 10 commandments and all this Levitical law, how does that relate to Jesus' ministry? Because, the Old Testament stuff is most people that are non-Christians read that and would say, it's just a book of rules, just designed to take the fun out of life. Don't do this, don't do that. And then you get to the New Testament, and Jesus starts teaching. His first sermon in Matthew chapter 5 is about the Beatitudes, which are kind of a different way to look at the same things as the Ten Commandments. And they go like this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 reads, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So blessed are the humble. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who experience loss. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." And that's more of a humility attitude. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And blessed are those who pursue God and the things that are right. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are those who care about other people." And you see a pattern in all this is blessed are those who do not put themselves first, who give their life back. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And those are the upright, the ones that fight against evil. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are the ones who put out conflicts, basically, who don't add to the fire, who don't engage the selfish thing of, yeah, that's right, these people are terrible. Blessed are the ones who say, no, these are children of God. These are people just like you and I. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In other words, blessed are those who are dedicated to Christ, dedicated to God no matter what. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Blessed are those who stand for what's right. And you know what the synonym for blessed in that is? It's happy. Happy are the ones who experience all this. Happy are the humble. Happy are the ones who pursue God. Happy are the ones who fight evil. Happy are the ones who suffer for what they stand for. And none of it makes sense. Why would it make me happy to be persecuted? Well, if your heart is like God's, you believe that everything that's happening right now is God's desire to bring you back to Him, to bring you back into fellowship. And it's part of the sacrifice that we get to make that doesn't cost us our lives. In fact, it brings our lives. And what's really interesting about this stuff is these are kind of cheat codes, I think, for how to live a holy life. As the Sermon on the Mount goes on to talk about how to aim at Christ and how to make your life on the right path towards godly living. And so I found this little video of the importance of aiming. Being on the right path and directing your life in the correct way. So let's watch that video.
I almost weigh twice the weight that I normally have, and it's very difficult to do a perfect exit. Do not over-rotate, because if I start over-rotating, there's no air that you can use to slow down.
Okay, Joe, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go, Felix.
I'm going over.
First 25 seconds, it looked like everything's under control. And after 34 seconds, I hit Mach 1, and I broke the speed of sound.
Was that him breaking it?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? That's a good video to watch, by the way. So that's Felix Baumgartner. By the way, sorry to all the flat earthers in here that saw that video. It's just going to wreck your... I actually heard the other day somebody on a news feed said, listen, there's evidence for flat earth all around the globe. I was like, well, is there though? Yeah, so sorry, flat earthers, but that guy was 24 miles up when he took that jump. And I can just imagine, again, putting myself in that guy's shoes. If somebody came up to me and was like, hey, before you go up, just one more thing. Try to drop just straight out of that thing if you can, because we're worried that you might miss. And the first thing he says up there is like, once I leave, I can't do anything. There's no air to push against. There's no nothing. I can just imagine myself saying, well, like, miss what? Miss lunch? Miss dinner? What are we talking about? He's like, no, miss New Mexico. We want you to land in New Mexico, so just fall straight out. But the point of it is, these things that Jesus is talking about, and later on in his Sermon on the Mount, he says, you have heard it said, don't commit murder. Yeah, got it. Haven't committed murder. But he goes on to say, don't even be angry with somebody, because that's where it starts. And that's why these Beatitudes are important. Because anger leads someplace. And if you're not aimed in the right direction, and if you're angry and bitter and hateful and resentful, guess where it leads? Murder. And nobody wants to commit murder. Nobody wakes up on a Thursday and says, I'm a murderer today. Today's Thursday. It starts way back when you start to hate somebody. That's why I say these are cheat codes for keeping your life pointed to Christ. Because it starts small. We don't want to aim in the wrong direction and say, I got it. Reminds me of the guy going down the freeway with a mattress on his car and his hands clamped down on it like, I got it, don't worry about it. I'm like, dude, you don't got it. That mattress is coming off. I don't care what your little baling twine thing is doing. No, I'm pretty strong. No, you're not. You don't got it. You need to aim your life correctly and make sure that the things are in order at the very beginning. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. In other words, I'm not going to make these small steps towards big sins. Nobody wants to get there, but it all starts somewhere. That's why I say these are cheat codes, because Jesus is saying, listen, have a humble attitude, acknowledge God, pursue the things that are right and righteous, don't envy, don't want what somebody else has, and that's how you're going to be happy. And don't worry when people persecute you for the things that you stand up for, because you're persecuted on my behalf. Don't worry about it. Sacrifice a little bit of yourself, not your life, not your whole breathing, pumping blood system, just a little bit to be connected with me. And it prevents separation. And the other thing that because we're here at Easter weekend, I wanted to share a little bit about that, but first, one of the great stories in Proverbs, one of my favorite things, I talk about this with my family and friends quite a bit. It's found in Proverbs chapter 7, verses 6 through 8. I think I switched up my verse, but that's okay. At the window of my house, I looked out through the lattice. I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men, a youth who lacked judgment. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house. It's tragic. I asked, well, where do you think the mistake occurred in this? Was it when he got to the person's house who was a prostitute? Was it when he got there? Was it when he was walking in that direction? Or was it when he got up off his chair and said, I'm going to go for a walk. All I'm doing is going for a walk, but I know the direction that I'm going. That's where the mistake happened. That's where he got off course. Because he walked away from God's best. He walked away from God's plan. And it's a rule that happens every time. That's why we have accountability groups in this church. And if you're not a part of one, you need to be, because you can't do it on your own. You need to have a source of accountability, iron sharpens iron type of relationships with someone to hold you accountable, to keep your aim correct. Because it's Easter, I want to go over a couple more rules as you go through this week to be thinking about. One of my favorite ones, it's both terrifying and reassuring sometimes, is that, man, the clock is ticking. You've heard it said probably that time is the only currency that we spend without knowing how much we have. Isn't that amazing to think about? There's no amount in the account. We don't know, but we do know it's going to come to an end at some time. And I was reading a story about twins in their mother's womb. And one twin, they're very smart twins, these preborn twins, they're very smart. They were having a conversation, and one of them says, aren't you excited to see what's on the other side of this world? And his brother responds and says, well, no, there's nothing on the other side of this world. It's impossible, that can't exist. I mean, how would we live? And he says, no, we're getting too big for this space. Our time here is coming to an end. And the other twin says, well, how are we gonna live without being attached to this cord? That's where we get everything. That's where the food comes in. That's where the air, the liquid oxygen comes in. That's where the food comes in. He's like, well, it's going to be different. Don't worry, we'll eat with our mouths. And like, eat with our mouths? How does that even work? And he says, well, aren't you excited to get out of this cramped space? He's like, no, I've got everything I need here. Everything I have because of this womb. And it's perfect. It's comfortable and it's warm and it rocks me to sleep. He's like, well, yeah, but we're not going to fit in here forever. We've gotten bigger. And he says, don't you want to see mother? Or don't you want to see father? Don't you want to see our parents? He's like, what are you talking about? There's nothing beyond this womb. And finally the twin says, well, don't you hear the voice? Every so often, don't you hear a murmur? of something outside of us? Don't you hear the breath beside us? And we've all been there. May not remember it. I don't. But we were all there in a world that we could not explain, didn't know where it was, but we were going someplace else, and it's the same thing. The clock is ticking. We don't know how much time we have, but we're going to a place that we can't describe. And it's going to be better. And it's a rule, because we're going to a place that God has prepared for us if you know Christ. And in the Easter weekend, the Easter season, people's minds are on Easter, whether they're going just to feel good, going to, who knows what, to take their kids to an Easter egg hunt, it doesn't matter. But we have an opportunity to reach people and have the gospel message of Jesus Christ presented to them. And have somebody tell them that God loves them and has a plan for them, just like he did for us. To tell them that in spite of the rules that you read in the Old Testament that can seem evil and brutal and gross, that the whole reason God did that is because he wanted to bring us back into fellowship with him. And he didn't require our lives. He doesn't require our death. And then ultimately, Jesus this week is passing by on his way to the cross to lay his life down, another life that God provided as the ultimate sacrifice in our place. And that's the heart of God. Always, always God provides a way to bring us back to him. And it's an incredible story, and it's a different way to think of it sometimes, but everything that God does, he does for us to bring us back into fellowship with him. So we get to sing one more current, retro, classic, top 10 today's hits song, but I want you to be thinking of somebody or some way and grab an invitation card on the way out, because next week could be pivotal in somebody's life, all right? Well, let's sing together.